year last year, 2.6 million jobs created last year. And here, the first month of this year, 304,000 net new jobs. That's more than economists had expected.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome back to the program. Happy Friday to ya. So excited to see you here. Absolutely pumped up about it being Friday. I'm not going to lie. I worked pretty hard this week. Grateful to have been able to do so. But now, we're going to do this show. We're going to enjoy ourselves. And then we're all going to have the weekend. So welcome to the program. I'm just overjoyed to be with you. We have a jam-packed program for you today. We're going to be chatting with Jasper Fakher. He is the editor-in-chief of the Epoch Times. And you might have heard them or seen them on your radar recently because the president has been tweeting out some of their stories. I met Jasper at CPAC, and he actually came on the show from there, but I don't blame you if it doesn't stick out just yet because remember we had, I think, 23 guests over 2 days. So you might not recall, but he came on. He's an expert, and I'm so excited to get to talk to him today. He's going to join us and talk about the Russia collusion. I'm glad to talk about it still from the perspective of something that it's kind of in the rearview mirror, but not really because the Democrats don't want to let it go. And I get it. I understand what's going on. It's hard to lose. It's hard to admit that you just gotten it wrong. Yeah, it's hard. But no matter. We're going to discuss that. We're going to get into all of the good news. The jobs report is out. 196,000 new jobs last month. Wages are up. Median home sale prices are way up. Refinances are up. This is great news for people who are paying attention. And if you're not basing your analysis of the economy on partisanship, if you just are looking for opportunities to increase wealth, take advantage of opportunities that might not be there a year from now or 5 years from now, then this is a great time to be looking around and assessing the lay of the land. As someone I spoke to earlier today, looking at the fundamentals. I like that. I like the way that sounds. So you can do all of that and you can get wise counsel from your financial advisor, or you can go to your bank and speak to one of the people that does, personal banking. If you have a business, it might be a time to talk to your business banker and see what options are available to you. Maybe it's a good time to start, basically snowballing some debt down. Whatever the situation, might be time to look for a new job. Maybe you want to get out there and assess the situation and maybe trade up, get a promotion or something. In any case, if you take the partisanship out of it and just say, how does this economy look compared to a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? It's definitely improved. So why not take advantage of it? So we'll be getting into that a little bit. But first thing we have to kind of unpack is this idea that 650,000 illegals are going to be released into America this year because we're going to hit well over 1 million illegal aliens crossing the southern border, and around 60 to 65% of them have to be released into the country due to the fact that we don't have enough detention facility space to house them. And because they're coming in, they're dragging kidnapped kids over the border with them. So they're coming in as so-called family units. That's an outrageous number. For perspective, I broadcast out of the suburbs of St. Louis. The population of the city of St. Louis, the 66 contiguous miles that comprise the city of St. Louis, that population is 315,000. We're talking about 650,000 being released into the interior of the country over the next, remember, this is April. So we don't have a whole 12 months left of this year now, do we? So for Democrats, we have to subtract off January, February, March, and April. Okay? I know everybody else already kind of picked that up, but for people who are a little slow on the uptake, you don't count those months. So 650,000 for the remainder of the year. Okay, you can't possibly be okay with that. I know I'm not. So here's Representative Gohmert. He says every gangster coming across means somebody's going to be raped or mobbed or robbed. It's number 5.
Well, we need more people down there. I think the president's going to have to send more military to assist. But you've actually got border patrolmen that are pushing baby carriages instead of protecting our border. And every one of the border patrol know that when they're in processing or trying to in process the hordes of people coming across, that's when the drug cartels send their biggest shipments of drugs, weapons, people that we would not allow into this country, MS-13ers. They bring them in while our folks are being occupied. So it's just outrageous. And every gangster coming across means somebody is going to be raped in this country, somebody's going to be robbed, and we need those people back on the border. It is just incalculable, the damage that the Democrats are doing by not helping our president.
So this is not about me lacking the understanding required to get that Democrats don't want to help the president because the Republicans didn't want to help President Obama. I get that. This isn't about that. This in no way is a reflection of, me not understanding that these are two opposing factions. But even in a divorce, the two adults are supposed to be able to work out what's best for, let's say, the division of assets or disposition of property like businesses owned, or in the most devastating case, what to do with the kids, how to spend time with them and maintain relationships with both sides. And I'm using the divorce metaphor because we're talking about a very hostile situation right now where it's no longer two parties that are both seeking the best for America and opposing each other on how to get there. It's two divergent views of America, two divergent kind of thought processes. One is, let's tear this thing down, set it on fire, burn it to the ground. It's no good. We need socialism. And then the other side is, let's light little fires over here and there, and we'll let some things burn. But generally speaking, we're trying to maintain, what we've already got. And the little fires I'm talking about are the establishment Republicans and the ones who they're just as much for open borders as anybody on the D side. And so it's disgusting. We're talking about lives here, deaths, people who are being killed, and the fact that they're being killed not mattering to those who've been elected to govern on our behalf. So here's Representative Gohmert. He kind of wraps things up, and he makes a great point here about changing tactics down at the southern border. It's number 6.
Well, and that is the criminals coming across. And we know that the drug cartels control every single inch of the border, and the president's doing all he can. And the threat to close the border should be taken as very real because we've got to do something to stop these folks. And I think a very critical thing would be to say use non-lethal methods to prevent people from setting one foot in our country, because once they get a foot here, it's a matter of in processing them. And I think the president would be well justified to just say no more asylum until we get this under the control.
Now, of course, that would, the ACLU would file suit, but they're soon no longer going to have that automatic rubber stamp to whatever they file suit on at the Looney Ninth Circuit. The Looney Ninth is going to return to constitutional order. The president has been working on that for 2 years. It's going to happen. It's answered prayer. And so I'm going to touch on a couple of points here, because when I say 650,000 people who are here in the country illegally, who've not been vetted, they've not been tested for diseases. These people are, some of them MS-13 gang members. Some of them are Bangladeshis. Some of them are Chinese nationals. Some of them are from the Middle East. When I say that these people are coming in and they're getting released into the country, and that's just got to be disturbing for you. I know for me, the minute I saw the story earlier this week, I just was unsettled by it. And it's just been there, like, a pebble in the inside of your stocking, and you're like, you can't stop and change it because maybe you're on stage or you're in public somewhere and you can't stop and take the pebble out. So you just have to deal with it. And it's just been eating away. And I finally was listening to something on the news yesterday, and I just stopped and I said a prayer. And I just asked God to stop this, because he can. There's nothing that's too great for God. So What I want to do now is, first thing first, sometimes when we get news like this and it just sits there, it can make the news itself and the people who are working against the better interests of Americans, it can make it seem as if they're winning and there's nothing we can do about it. And that is a lie from the pit of hell. So first of all, who are we? Who are we in Christ? We're accepted. We're children of God. We're God's friends. We've been justified. We are united with the Lord and one spirit with him. We have been bought with a price and we belong to God. We are members of Christ's body. We're secure, free from condemnation. We are assured that all things work together for the good of those that love God and are called according to his purpose. We cannot be separated from the love of God. We're free from any condemning charges against us. We have been established, anointed, and sealed by God. And we are significant. We are the salt and light of this earth. We are part of the true vine and a channel of his life. We have been chosen and appointed to bear fruit. We are personal witnesses of Christ. We are God's temple, and we are ministers of reconciliation. So that clears the slate. Now we don't have that, that fear that, how can this be solved? How can this be fixed? Then we have to be prepared to ask God in agreement with each other. And I know in this audience, we have agreement on the fact that it is not in the best interest of this country to allow people to come in the southern border without going through our proper channels and immigration processes and be released into the interior of the country, possibly never to ever leave America again. That form of illegal immigration completely destroys lawful immigration and people's desire to come into the country lawfully. And lawlessness and tyranny are not of God. I know we have agreement on that. So what I want to do now is I felt a sense of peace when I said that quick prayer. And believe me, at the moment when I said it, it wasn't even like I said, let me say a prayer. I just said the prayer in reaction to hearing that news story again. I've seen it online a few times. I heard it on the radio and I just said the prayer really quickly. And in that moment, I realized this is what we have to do. And so it's Friday. We have the weekend to go into. And I don't know about you, but I am not prepared to go into the weekend after working so hard this week. And really, I need the time off. And I need to reconnect with my husband and the kids and the little fluffy white dog. I need to get outside and do some gardening and not be in here with the computers and the radio stuff, which I love to do. I'm grateful, but I need to unplug. It's impossible to do that with a story that all-encompassing sitting there in our faces, knowing that we have really every powerful entity arrayed against us, except who's more powerful than God. So we have to pray and give our concerns to him, leave them at the altar so we can go on and enjoy what God has for us. Because the weekend is a blessing to us. It's a gift to us from God. We work and then we get time off to rest and recharge and to get in the pew and spend time with him. So I'm going to have a quick word of prayer. And this is for anybody out there, if you're feeling like me, like this is some really oppressive, depressing news that seems insurmountable. He's been working on it for 2 years. I think I have a minute then. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time. Please solve our immigration crisis. Please bring it into right order. You're a holy God and nothing is impossible for you. We trust you. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. We'll be back with Jasper Fakher of the Epoch Times right after this.
On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, we took the spices that we'd prepared and we went into the tomb. We found the stone rolled away from the tomb. When we went in, we didn't find the body of our Lord Jesus. Who took him? Where is he? Who took him?
Why do you look for the living among the dead?
Where's Jesus?
He's not here. He has risen.
Jesus was alive. He's alive.
Jesus was betrayed, abandoned, mocked, beaten, and then crucified on a cross for sinners like you and me. The Son of God was buried, and after 3 days, he rose from that grave. American Family Radio encourages you to rejoice in the glorious reality that our God is a living God.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I have a friend who was once a well-known pastor. Some years ago, he committed the sin of adultery. He had to leave a thriving ministry in shame and embarrassment. Well, I'm glad to report today he's repented, and God has restored him. In fact, if you knew him today, you'd find a sweet, humble man of God, and he'd tell you quickly what keeps him close to the heart of God is the memory of his failure and the depth of God's forgiveness. It's sad but true. Some of us are not enjoying intimacy with God simply because we think we're too deserving. I read the Bible every day. There's no horrendous sin in my life, and because I'm doing the right stuff, God needs to be close to me. We don't articulate it that way, but that's our legalistic attitude. We don't see ourselves the way God sees us. If we did, we'd realize how messed up we are. No, God's heart is especially tender toward the broken and contrite. Listen to these sweet words in verse 18 of Psalm 34. The Lord is near the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. It is when we acknowledge our pain that God rushes in. He's near those who acknowledge the pain of what they've done. It's also when we acknowledge the pain of what our sin caused that he delivers us. Notice what he says in the latter part of the verse, and saves those who are crushed in spirit. It's like, oh man, I did that. How could I have done that? Well, here's what I want you to remember today. If you want an intimate relationship with God, you must run from pride, acknowledge your neediness, and turn to the one who was crushed for you. When you look up, you'll find God standing right next to you.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the show. He's the editor-in-chief of the Epoch Times, Jasper Fakher. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, yeah, you guys have a ton of great content over there, and I want to give everybody the website so they can go over and have that bookmarked maybe so they can always check your new content or maybe sign up for your newsletter.
Sure. So the website is theepochtimes.com.
Okay, so theepochtimes.com. I've been there before. I've read quite a few of my favorites actually do columns over there. So Dr. Carol Swain is one of them. She writes for the Epoch Times. So it's wonderful to have that kind of a platform for news and information. And it's from the international perspective. You guys cover a lot of topics and subjects like Israel and some of our foreign policy things. And then, of course, everything having to do with politics and culture here in America.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about this collusion. First of all, there's been a finding of no collusion. It's a wonderful bit of news for Americans who didn't want to believe that the President of the United States was an agent of the Russian government. Yet there's still a lot of chat that it makes it seem as if we really didn't get the Mueller report and maybe he really wasn't exonerated. And what do you make of that?
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, I personally think it's just thin, to be honest. You know, the William Barr, the Attorney General, put out his summary in which he cites part of the Mueller report, which specifically says that there was no evidence of collusion found. So, I mean, that's pretty absolute. We also know that the special counsel didn't make any additional referrals, criminal referrals, as a result of its investigation. So, I mean, it certainly looks like there was no collusion. And, you know, many people knew that there was no collusion. We as a media, for example, over the past few years, we never bought into this narrative that Trump was somehow compromised by the Russians. because there simply was never any evidence to support this. I mean, there have been many stories in the news. Many of them were based on anonymous sources. But, those paying attention saw that those stories fell apart like days or weeks later. So, I think some people are just spinning it. They just, they just don't seem to be able to let go of the idea that somehow Trump was compromised by Russia.
Well, it's actually serves a purpose for Democrats because it gives them cover so that they don't have to discuss their lack of policy ideas. They don't have policies that would do a better job of spurring on the economy or protecting us abroad for foreign policy or even domestic energy policy. None of their ideas are better than what we currently have or what the Trump administration has proposed. And I think that's a really uncomfortable place to be in, where you can't actually say this is something you're doing badly and here's our idea that's better. Even on healthcare, which they are in control of, we're still operating under Obamacare. That's also a failure for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you look, the interesting question is, if you look at the origins of the Trump collusion narrative, we've published several big stories on it. At some point, we decided to start using the word Spygate. And when we say Spygate, what we mean is the creation of the Russia collusion narrative, and with the goal of either preventing Trump from becoming president or removing him after he became office. And that's the seriousness of this issue. It really appears that there was some sort of you can use the word conspiracy, by different people involved that were working against his presidency. So when we really started looking into this, we uncovered the involvement of a lot of people in the different agencies. Obviously, the Clinton campaign was involved. A lot of the private entities were involved. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of Fusion GPS, which is a company that had been hired by the law firm Perkins Coie on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the DNC to produce this Steele dossier. And that Steele dossier was then spread systematically through these different agencies, to the FBI, to the DOJ, to the State Department, basically to create the reason for them to investigate Trump. So it's very concerning.
Well, I guess so that's the next investigation, right? We've heard a couple of people, Lindsey Graham and Devin Nunes, have said that they want to look into that and possibly open another special counsel. Do you feel, Jasper, that would be wise, or should they just keep their powder dry and wait until the president hopefully wins a second term before they do anything like that?
Oh, this has to be investigated. I mean, this should never happen again. I mean, this time it was Trump. Next time, who knows who it is. If it is true that people from within the government, that our intelligence agencies and our law enforcement agencies were weaponized against the presidential candidate, I mean, this should never happen again. Yeah, this should be very thoroughly investigated. Some parts of it are being investigated. The DOJ Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, confirmed just 2 weeks ago that his office is still investigating the issue of potential FISA abuse, which relates specifically to the FISA warrant that the FBI got on former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. So that is being investigated. But, from my perspective, all of this should be very thoroughly investigated because, it should never happen again.
So I cannot disagree with you. In fact, what I find most interesting about it is that the Democrats don't see the danger of allowing a process like this, where it was actually initiated when Trump was in a campaign mode. So he was not the president. He was a private citizen. The danger of allowing this to stand and not be investigated and no one to be brought to justice is that, just like the nuclear option on judges for the Supreme Court, that was part of Harry Reid's thing that he abolished, and Mitch McConnell got on the Senate floor and said, you'll rue the day that you made this decision because one day we'll be in power again and we're not going to reverse it back. And Harry Reid just laughed and then went on into retirement, and that's exactly what happened. So if this was allowed to stand the way the Democrats appear they would like it to, we could see a Republican president or an outgoing Republican president launch an investigation into a Democratic candidate and ruin their life, ruin the lives of anybody who ever worked with them, the way they've done with a lot of the Trump these are Trump surrogates and affiliates, people who really, had it not been for the campaign, they never would have been investigated, and their wrongdoings wouldn't have been uncovered. I'm not trying to justify what they did wrong, but it's the simple proximity to President Trump, then candidate Trump, that brought about their demise. I don't think Democrats want that reality when it's their turn.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think anybody would want this reality. And you know what the thing that's scary about this is? When we looked into it and we produced this infographic in October last year, and we really mapped it out, and just the sheer number of people involved in this, it's staggering. We have over 100 people on this infographic who, were somehow related to this Spygate scandal. A lot of the media were somehow involved because Christopher Steele, who I just mentioned, who had produced this dossier on Trump, he had been briefing the media on the contents of this dossier, and this dossier had been, spreading through the media. We also know from a deposition that was released recently from David Kramer, who was an aide to former Senator John McCain, that he had been talking to, I believe it was between 10 and 15 reporters. So, this wasn't just a small incident. It appears to have been a large effort to spread disinformation on Donald Trump in this case and to work against him.
So the other thing that I think has really been beneficial to the Democrats about this whole investigation is that in the run-up to the fall of 2016 elections, I believe the Russia investigation and the fact that the Mueller report had not been completed enabled them to flip some districts, suburban districts, in their favor, and that's how they won the House back. I don't hear many people talking about that. Do you feel like your research and your you guys have been investigating this for the whole time? Do you see that too, or am I off there?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a reasonable assertion to make because, many people were thinking that the president had genuinely been compromised by the Russians. So, of course, it's going to hurt in the election. Some people have suggested that the investigation went on longer than it had to. I'm not entirely sure about that because, I do think that it was a big investigation, and I do think that the investigation, it's a good thing that the investigation was thorough because it really, the Mueller investigation, concluding that there was no evidence, really puts a stop to this idea because, they looked everywhere and they couldn't find it. So.
Right. So we saw the statistics, 2,800 interviews or something. I've lost track of what it was, but people were using it the first few days after the report came out of all of the resources that were available to him. And at no point did the president or the White House team say, you can't have an interview or you can't speak to these people. I think earlier this week, I played a bit of audio from the son-in-law, so Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner. He said he provided over 20 hours of live testimony, question and answer.
Wow.
And anytime they requested him, he showed up. So no one ever denied them anything they were looking for, and they still couldn't find evidence of obstruction or collusion. I mean, it's stunning that they weren't able to dig something up because everyone thinks Donald Trump is so dirty, when in reality, he's kind of squeaky clean. He is, you get what you get with him, like whatever you see is what you get, which I kind of felt like that's what it was. But I even said on air, if he's guilty of anything, then, so be it, bring it out into the open. But a little part of me was kind of like, I just don't see it. I don't see him doing, underhanded dealings with the Russians. He doesn't have to. He had many opportunities to make money without doing it that way, without having the Russians underwrite his campaign or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, in a way, again, because this narrative was so deeply embedded in our collective consciousness, because it was said so many times, I personally think it really took something as big as this. I mean, sadly, because again, I've never seen the evidence of collusion, and obviously there wasn't any, and many people knew that there wasn't any. But I do think it took something as big as this investigation to prove to a lot of people that there really was no collusion, and I don't think anything short of it would have convinced them. And like you mentioned, there's still a lot of people in the media and whatnot that they'll say, oh, maybe the full report has something that, I mean, I just don't believe that. I mean, and we'll see that when the full report gets released. But yeah, they just seem to be holding on to this narrative. So.
Well, I think also, Jasper, just logically speaking, and I've been saying this, and, of course I don't know what the future holds, but obviously for Attorney General Barr, if he were to have, dumbed down the report or done a summary that left out an important detail that showed collusion or something like that, that would be such an embarrassment for him, and it would end his career. But also, but also, don't you think, Jasper, if he did that the Mueller team would have immediately said the AG's summary leaves out some important points and we need to make those, in other words, how does he get away with hiding something in the Mueller report, in his summary, anything that's super important that points to collusion or obstruction, without someone else in the know, because there are plenty of people and there's been plenty of leaking, outing him and saying, there he goes, he's a Trump stooge, he's not telling the truth.
Yeah, that's such an excellent point. I mean, you're spot on. I mean, it's just so illogical. In the days following, the release of the summary, I believe Barr already told Congress that he'll provide them with the full report. I believe it's mid-April. So, and he also acknowledged the public interest in this case and the importance for transparency. So, I personally believe that the report will be made public. You made an excellent point. It's not, if they grossly misrepresented something, obviously that reflects very badly on the Department of Justice. I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I actually think he, he probably could have gotten it out faster, but he went over one more time with a fine-tooth comb because he's under such harsh scrutiny by the Democrats, and his confirmation process was fraught with, him having to promise he wouldn't obstruct the investigation and that he could be impartial. And so he actually had a really good reputation going in to his confirmation hearing from both sides of the aisle previous to this new wave of Democrats. He'd been well respected by both sides. So he just doesn't have any reason to hold anything back. And I think it's going to be like if you call the 2016 elections the original nothing burger, right? Because it was supposed to be Hillary and it turned out to be Donald Trump. So it was a nothing burger for the Democrats. And then you say that this Mueller report is like nothing burger part 2 years of investigating the president, finding nothing. Then the release of the full report is going to be like an even bigger, emptier nothing burger because they're going to be searching, looking for something that is not there.
I mean, that's what it looks like. I completely agree. And honestly, being in the media business, it surprises me because, I really thought that, the Mueller report coming out and saying there's no evidence, obviously it's a major inflection point for a lot of media to question themselves, like how, why did they allow themselves to be so misled? But it appears that that's not happening. So, I think in terms of public trust, just, a lot of media have lost their credibility, quite frankly.
True, but not you guys over at the Epoch Times. You guys are still blazing saddles. So, Jasper, thank you.
We're growing.
Yeah, you're definitely growing. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll talk to you again soon right here on the air on Stacy on the Right. The Epoch Times is where you can find him. I'll post the links on all the social media so you guys can find Jasper's work along with that of his entire staff over there. Great people. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
Building a strong marriage requires more wisdom, not to mention grace, than any of us have in ourselves. Lauren and I have discovered 8 core principles of an uncommon marriage. 1. Look to the Bible as your guidebook and to Christ as the living example for your marriage. 2. Stay in sync spiritually. 3. Manage expectations and appreciate your differences. 4. Work as a team.
5. Practice committed love. 6. Communicate well and often. 7. Don't run away from conflict. And 8. Support each other in serving others.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
What or who motivates you to live and do life? Whether it's the motivation of your business or being healthy and fit, many times the why behind many individuals' determination is because of their children or grandchildren or even a spouse. Their primary why is because of a fallible being instead of Jesus. I know you're probably saying victory. I'm sure Jesus is a reason too, but Jesus should be the only reason for our whys in life. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 10, starting at verse 37, if you love your father, mother, son, or daughter more than him, then you are not worthy of being his. But if we give up our life for him, we will find life in him. It is only because of him we can do the things he has enabled us to do. Have your why be because of the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross for you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory Hollyfield. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
It's The Candidates with Brett Baer.
Former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke announced he was seeking the Democratic nomination for president. O'Rourke's campaign raised $6.1 million on the first day after announcing.
This is going to be a positive campaign.
Amy Walter, national editor of the Cook Political Report.
I don't live in Texas. I live in Arlington, Virginia. There were Beto for Senate signs in my neighborhood, okay? This sort of cult-like following.
Josh Kraushaar, political editor at National Journal.
Beto, the fact that we're calling him Beto, like, is incredible branding, right?
Yeah.
And you can't buy having people be interested in you or excited about you.
And Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios and co-founder of Politico.
O'Rourke, Beto, could be the next Obama, or he could be the next Howard Dean. And I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I think there's a lot of reason to be skeptical of his staying power.
You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. I'm Brett Baer.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, I think they're actually proving that they're basically rabid partisan Democrats who should not be investigating something where you have to have some degree of objectivity and fairness before you call people before committees. They obviously have none. They have no regard for the Constitution or the laws. I can show you letters from them that would be a joke in terms of total disregard for the attorney-client privilege, as if it doesn't exist. And now they want the Attorney General to violate Rule 6E, which is a federal felony, 5 years in prison. And they'd like him to violate possibly laws regarding classification, possibly damage innocent reputations. The reality is, I am absolutely confident that the Attorney General will put out a very, very complete part, if not all of it, whatever he can legally. And maybe they should change the law if they want to. And so that every grand jury, all grand jury testimony is just open to everybody. And there's no attorney-client privilege.
So that is former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani. And he's talking about the craziness of the demand to just release an unredacted report in its entirety. Now, let's be clear here. Something similar to that happened during when the report was issued for the Clinton, investigation into his acts with, his bad acts while he was in office. And that turned out to be a nightmare for the people who were involved on the periphery. So people who came in to testify or talk about what they knew, all of their testimony was exposed, and a lot of people's lives were irreparably damaged. And after that, they said they'd never do that again, that if you cooperate of your own volition, you're not subpoenaed or anything, you're just brought in and you know about whatever the subject of the investigation is, that you should not pay a huge penalty for just coming in and cooperating, for helping the investigation so that it can be completed. And so that is what's happening right now. If you're wondering what they're doing why they can't just turn it over. You know how it is. You get an email from somebody and they say, did you get a copy of, the Excel file from work? And they're like, yeah, hey, I got it. Yeah. And they say, can you forward it to me? And you're like, sure. And you just send it right over because they were meant to get it, but they just were left off the distribution list. That's one thing. But we're talking about 400 pages, and each page has to be gone through, and anyone who is in any information that's classified, that has to be redacted. Anything that refers to actions or, information that's classified, that has to be redacted. And then all of the other items having to do with innocent people who have nothing materially to do with the investigation. In other words, they're not wrongdoers. That has to be redacted to protect these people from what is really, it's going to be a circus. When the report is released, it's going to be an utter, it's going to be every fool for themselves running around like chickens with their heads cut off. I found it. I found the thing that Barr didn't release. I found the thing that Barr didn't share. I knew he was hiding something. I got it. And so chicken littles are going to be running around, and they're going to be all over CNN and MSNBC. And those little chicken littles are going to have so much to say, and they're just going to be flapping their gums. And anybody with good sense will have turned that off, and you'll be doing anything: knitting, crocheting, needle pointing, popping popcorn, trying out new recipes from the Greatest British Baking Show, whatever you can get yourself to do to get away from the talking nincompoops. I plan to already have some backup stuff, which honestly, I don't need to go any further but out the front door there for the gardening stuff, because it's been cold for so long. By now, I would have already at least put some stuff in pots, and I've done nothing. So I plan to and I don't mean I'll be gardening and listening to their drama, which I often will listen to live streams of news shows and stuff while I'm doing something else. Nope. I will not allow these people to steal my valuable time by listening to them talk about the nothing that they're going to find in the Mueller report. Now, I know they're going to release it, and it'll probably be on a script file. You can buy copies of, we already talked about that on the show. There are going to be a ton of people, like Dershowitz is doing a summary type preview type thing. He'll write the foreword, and then the actual report will be the book, and you'll be able to buy that on Amazon. And, I think some people will be purchasing that, not so much to read, but to have a copy because, of its historical value or whatever. I'm not saying I'm not going to go on and read some parts, but I'm going to let experts do the analysis. And if there's anything interesting to read, I will kind of allow that pointing to go on. And not because it's of President Trump, not because I have a partisan viewpoint on it. I'm very partisan. It's the Stacy on the Right show. I'm very partisan. But I do think that there's only so far that I'm willing to go with this. And we've wasted 2 years of our lives on this. Imagine if we'd spent the past 2 years writing our congressmen. So I want to share this with you. And also we have the call lines open. If you want to call in, talk about anything, it's Friday. You can talk about whatever you want. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So I had someone email me, and I won't share his name on the air. I'm not sure if he wanted me to do that, but he had this amazing suggestion. He said, we've spent a lot of time, we get outraged, and we do a lot of comments. And I'm not talking about the people who are on the live streams right now commenting, or people who come, sometimes to comment on my blog or send emails with like interesting information. I'm talking about the kind of outrage comments and tweets that we get involved in. And we've all been there, so I'm not judging. But he said that's a waste of our time because our legislators don't read the tweets or any of that stuff. They read the viral tweets, but it's so hard to get a viral tweet. You have to already be in that little circle where the biggest tweeters retweet you, et cetera, et cetera. And it's wonderful when it happens, but it doesn't mean you're changing any policy. And he suggested that instead of us commenting and doing all, Facebook postings and getting enraged and getting in arguments online with whoever, that we start writing letters to our congressmen because they actually count the number of letters they get on a particular subject. So while they don't pay attention to what's on social media and everybody acts like it's so important, they do pay attention to how many people sit down and write them a letter, whether it's typed out on your computer or it's printed in email, an email that you type up and then print, or if it's a formally typed letter that you print out on your own letterhead, or if it's a handwritten note that you scribble off and sign and send to them with your home address on it, because it has to have your home address so they know you're a constituent. In any case, whatever form the letter arrives in, that is when you are making an impact. And I think for us as Christians, we're told to number our days. We're told to be careful of the time. We're told our days are short and our lives are like the grass that dries up and withers and blows away. We're like a breath. We're gone in a puff. These are metaphors for how short our lives are. And so we don't want to waste our time on things that are meaningless and do not bring any results. And so I read the email and I thought, I got to talk about this on the air, because I do say here on the show that we want to effectively manage our elected officials, those who are placed in authority over us, because we elected them, right? Because we don't have a system where, you're just born into a family and all of a sudden you're in charge. We elect these people. They actually campaign and ask us for our votes. So why not write them? Imagine the impact we could have instead of, 1,000 comments on a Facebook posting from a news site, which the politicians don't read those. If 1,000 people wrote and said, Governor Northam, you may not represent the people of Virginia as an infanticide purveyor, like a Dr. Doom, a Dr. Death. You can't do that here. Imagine. I think he would have changed his tune. You want to see the lieutenant governor who's accused of sexual harassment receive the same treatment that Republicans have received? No one's writing. And the reason I think that the person who emailed me mentioned writing is because we've already seen what happens with these protests. The protests make the news. Sometimes they make a little internet star out of one or two people. Oftentimes it results in violence and people get arrested. But the legislators haven't really been swayed, because the ones who are on the same side as the protesters see it as a validation of their position, and the ones who are on the opposing side to the protesters see another group of wacky, people showing up, stinking up the joint and protesting. And that's a reference to the Occupy Wall Street people. Sorry, because not all protesters are stinky, just the Occupy Wall Street ones. So what would be more effective? What would be a better use of our time? The other thing that the letters provide us, if you think about it, is if you write a letter to your legislator, they know you're serious. They've got your address and your phone number now. They're probably going to put you on their must-knock list for any get-out-the-vote effort because they're going to want to know at the door, they're going to want to send someone to your house at the door to say, you've written us before, and we want to know, we want to ask for your vote again. And if you say no, then they've got an inkling of where the election is going to go. And the reason that's important is because they kind of take this tack with people who write letters. The ones who write letters are more serious, because the ones who write letters are more likely to say to an email group of 50, this is the letter that I sent to my legislator and I haven't heard anything back. Or this is the letter that I sent and this is the letter that he sent me back. You know what I mean? They have to try to calculate the entirety of what they're getting from you and how serious you are about it. Now, multiply that out. Think about how many of us are really interested and we want to do our God-given mandate in managing our elected officials, but our comments on Facebook and our time, tweeting or what have you, we're not seeing much. And I can tell you, I asked a legislator that I know here locally, and I asked him about an issue that we're having at our house with a utility company, and he pointed me to my elected official because he's in the district adjacent to me. I happen to know him because we're in some other groups for like things that I do in DC. And so I reached out to that other legislator and I sent a text because that's the mode of communication it was forwarded to me, and he hasn't gotten back to me. And so my first thought was, oh, well, I mean, how about if we just let 10,000 people on Facebook know about it? Like I can just post it on my Facebook wall and tag him and see if he responds then. But then I thought to myself after reading this letter, I'm like, oh, so he might be one of those ones where a text doesn't matter to him because there's no record of that. But if I mail a letter to his office, then everybody in the office will have seen the letter. And then he'll know that I'm serious about getting my question answered about a bill that he apparently voted out of committee and got passed a couple of years ago that directly impacts this utility issue that I'm having. So the question is, which of these items do we want to spend our time on so that we can be effective and actually manage these people? And I think the letter writing, it seems archaic, but it's actually super fun. Do you get, I just pointed over there like you guys can see it. I have a little stack of cards that I've gotten recently from a couple of women who they're like spiritual sisters or moms to me. They've been mailing me, they've been communicating with me by mail, snail mail. And I've been loving it. And it's so neat to get something and open it up and look inside and read what someone wrote with their own hand about anything. And they're never really super long, but it's just nice. And so I want to posit that to you as we go into the weekend. Are we going to use the most effective mode of communicating with these people? And if we aren't, why aren't we? And there's no harm in us giving this a try, like writing these people and saying, I saw that you're voting against X. I don't agree with it. I'm a constituent. I want you to vote this way. I think the letters can be simple. I think they can be effective, especially if they're not super long and they're not wordy, then they'll probably have the most impact. But they sort those letters for and against whatever issue. They know how many people have reached out. I don't know that in fact, I'm pretty sure they don't pay attention to the stuff on Facebook and Twitter unless your comment goes viral and it becomes a news item. So since the likelihood of that is pretty slim, we have to go back to the original method. And sometimes the traditional method is best. So I spent that time on this because I think it's super important. It's not an accident that guy sent me that email. It was a good email. And this is an important issue for us. Now, I want to see us effectively not just manage them, but turn the tide, because we know better. We know they can do better than this. There's just no reason in God's green earth that Mitch McConnell should have ever spoke out against the president on shutting down the border when we have 650,000 illegal aliens who are going to be released into this country this year. We will crest 1.5 million illegal entrants, and then we will have 650,000 of them, because about 500,000 will be turned back, and 650,000 of them will be because they're family units and they have kids with them. They're minors. They'll be released into America, and they will not leave. That is unacceptable. And even Mitch McConnell, with his old Chamber of Commerce self, should be able to understand that. He should be able to fix his mouth to support the president on this. But because he doesn't hear from his constituents in Kentucky, he just does whatever he's going to do. And that's just not going to fly. That dog won't hunt, as my Aunt Maxine says. We've got to do better at managing these people. So let's get our pens and paper out, our emails, our laptops, and let's try something different. I believe we can win, not because we're awesome or because we're Americans, but because we serve a God who does not lose. He doesn't lie. He takes every hill. He owns it all. And he's given us his power to do his will here on this earth, but we've got to take it. That's the end of this hour. God bless you from the heartland if you're leaving us. If you're sticking around, onenewsnow.com. News and information up next.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Being there is half the battle. 1milliondads.com exists to help Christian fathers to be present and intentional in the lives of their children. Our hope is to wake up the fearsome wonder that is the mighty man of God and restore him to his role as leader, teacher, and counselor. Visit 1milliondads.com. 1milliondads.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Prime Minister Theresa May is trying to hold off on the UK's departure from the European Union. Simon Owen reports.
Theresa May writing to EU President Donald Tusk, asking to push the UK's departure back to June 30th. It's currently set for next Friday, but the UK Parliament still can't agree on the divorce process. An EU spokesperson declining comment ahead of a leaders' summit next week.
The only game in town is the European Council, which will start Wednesday at 6 p.m.
The alternative to an extension, Britain leaves without a transition deal, something neither side wants. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
This week, President Donald Trump insisted Congress take his threat to close the southern border seriously, this time telling reporters his next move if Mexico still doesn't want to cooperate.
I never changed my mind at all. I may shut it down at some point, but I'd rather do tariffs.
He has floated a 25% tariff on cars imported from Mexico. The president is in Calexico, California today, where he'll visit a recently completed part of the southern border wall. Another lawsuit has been filed over President Trump's attempt to fund the border wall.
20 states, including New York, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin, are part of a motion filed in California to block the Trump administration from diverting more than $1.5 billion in federal funding that's meant for law enforcement, drug interdiction, and military construction projects. President Trump wants to put that money toward building a wall on the southern U.S. border. The states included in the filing also seek to protect environmental resources they say would be harmed by the construction of a border wall in New Mexico. Pam Puso, Fox News.
A pro-family activist says the left scored a trifecta with the election of Lori Lightfoot as the next mayor of Chicago. Chad Groening reports.
Lightfoot won a resounding victory in Tuesday night's election, coming from relative political obscurity to defeat an established member of Chicago's political machine with nearly 74% of the vote. Lightfoot is the perfect candidate of the left, which prides itself on identity politics. Peter LaBarbera is founder and president of Americans for Truth about homosexuality.
If you're a woman, an African American, and a lesbian, that's like a trifecta for the left. I don't really care about somebody's skin color, but the left stokes a false racism narrative. The left pushes homosexuality. She's obviously pro-abortion on demand. And so obviously this is a woman who could become the darling of the Democratic Party.
And LaBarbera says, unfortunately, Lightfoot's agenda for the city of Chicago will be extreme, which is the last thing the city needs.
They keep trying the same old thing. When they have a rash of murders, they say we need more gun control. It never works. They don't learn. And so I think more progressive politics in Chicago and more homosexual activism is the last thing the city needs, but that's what they're going to get.
I'm Chad Groening.
In an attempt to secure more Democrat voters, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is backing a bill that would give 16-year-olds the right to vote in federal elections. Bob Kellogg has more.
Representative Pelosi says, quote, it's really important to capture kids when they're in high school, according to C-SPAN. Derek Green of Project 21, a leadership group of black conservatives, does not think it's a good idea because high schoolers are usually ignorant of the policies and positions up for a vote.
If I'm a Democrat, I think it's a good idea because the more people who are ignorant of the issues but still vote for the party, the better. And I think that's the tactic that Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the Democrats are going for.
Green says most teachers are members of teachers' unions, the number one contributors to the Democrat Party. So he believes teachers would have an undue influence over gullible students.
Then you can almost be assured that the teachers are going to be pushing voter registration for their students for the Democrat Party.
Amendment 26 lowered the voting age from 21 to 18 in 1971 during the Vietnam War, when many complained soldiers were being sent off to war before they were old enough to vote. I'm Bob Kellogg.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fool because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible,
America was founded on liberty and independence and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free and we will stay free. Tonight, we renew our resolve that America will never be a socialist country.
What magic wand do you have?
A really strong job report to start the year, finishing really after a very strong year last year, 2.6 million jobs created last year, and here, the first month of this year, 304,000 net new jobs. That's more than economists had expected.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Yes, and we're back for hour 2. We have Paula Bolyard, who's a friend of mine. She's going to join us from PJ Media, and I can't wait to talk to her. That's next segment. I'd love to talk to you. If you would like to join us today, please do. We are live. Phone lines are open. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. Looky here. I'm getting a little bit of feedback online here from people who are saying, you know what, I actually am pretty good at writing letters, and I agree with you. That's what we should do. There are some other unintended benefits here. Just let's run through them real quick before we move on to our next subjects. First of all, it gives you a paper copy that you can print out. And when they do come knocking at your door or you get the email for the fundraising, you can send, an image, take it on your phone, just email them right back on their fundraising letter. Here are the letters that I wrote you and here were your responses. And these are the reasons why I'm not voting for you again. Oh, imagine the shift that we could see with these people. And there are literally millions of us, right? Congressional districts have hundreds of thousands of people in them. And senators, because there are only 2 for every state, most of them have multiple millions of people who are their constituents. And they're looking for anything they can use to quantify either a yes vote or a no vote, an inaction on a piece of legislation or action on a piece of legislation. A lot of them already know what direction they're going to go in because they are ideologically adhered to one side or the other. But some of them will test the wind and see, because my state, it's pretty equally split, or I'm in a purple state. We used to be solidly blue, but now we've leaned red, and vice versa. Then they're kind of, looking like Doug Jones. That's a guy who he literally is running ads in certain parts of his electoral base and leaving some parts out because he doesn't want his other constituents to know what he's up to because he's not conservative. So let's just consider the impact that we could have. And then, of course, we leave the results up to God. We just write these letters. We're respectful, no profanity, no name calling, none of that stuff. Respectfully reaching out to these people and then saying, hey, you know what, God, I've written this letter. I'm trying to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's in obedience to you. And I just ask you to, put your stamp on this letter, make it powerful, make it effective, make it hit the mark, that it's supposed to. And if you're not feeling super confident about whatever that you're trying to outline, of course, that's where our friends and neighbors can come in really handy. And that's how you also spur on that sense of community that a lot of people really complain that we don't have any, sense of community. Well, if we're all at home, like I'm gonna tell on my family now. I'm gonna tell, but I'll tell them tonight that I told on them. I went to the kitchen last night and I'd been upstairs and I came downstairs and I went in the kitchen and the 3 people that are in my family, because our oldest is in college, so she's not at home. Everybody was looking at an iPad or an iPhone or something. And a couple of them, I think, like the kids, I think were working on homework, but my husband was looking at his phone. And so there was no sound whatsoever in the room. Everyone was just looking at a device. And of course, me, I came in, I was like, well, what's going on in here? And, they were like, what? I'm doing homework. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but think of the community that we're missing because we let these devices suck up so much of our attention. And so rather than, again, it's not that I have anything against commenting on Facebook. I enjoy seeing the engagement numbers on my Facebook page do well. And it's because I know that if that's happening, that people are picking up the things that I'm posting and they're commenting on them. And, there's interaction there. But that can only go so far. And so being informed is important. You want to know what issues are going on. Like if you've not heard that story that's out there, and it's the truth. It's the actual estimate of number of people who are going to be released into the country this year, 650,000. If you'd not seen that and you just heard it today on the show, you're probably thinking, you know, oh, what do I do? Well, we've got to start convincing our friends and neighbors that, you know, we're not crazy. We are not only not crazy, we're looking after the best interests of our friends and neighbors, fellow Americans, in not wanting this to happen. And so the short-term goal of gaining power for the Democrats will end up with the destruction of what we just take it for granted. Don't you just take it for granted that, you know, obviously you pray before you leave the house, but you get on the road and your expectation is everyone's going to be pretty much within the bounds of the law. There'll be a speeder maybe or somebody riding a motorcycle acting stupid, but for the most part, everybody's going to drive properly. When they see a red light, they're going to stop. They're not going to drive their car without insurance or without a license. And we know enough Americans who will go outside of what I just explained there. Those just simple assumptions. You assume that when you go to the grocery store, no one's going to touch you or do anything to you. Not only they're not going to steal your cart, they're not going to steal your purse, they're not going to touch you or talk to you at all. Save the super short people who constantly ask me to get them the cereal boxes off the top rack. And I do it. I don't say anything. I just pass them the cereal and I say, anything else? And they say no, and then I go on about my business. I don't work at the grocery store, but I do it. We expect certain things because we live here. We expect women to be able to walk around. I mean, honestly, I told y'all about the time I was at Whole Foods and the lady had on the Beyonce onesie and a sheer duster and the boots were killer. You guys know I got a thing for boots. So the boots were amazing. The rest of it, I was kind of like, what is going on here? Like, do I see? I kind of turned my head. I was trying to, lock the minivan. I glanced over. I'm like, oh, those boots are nice, but what are you wearing? Are those your underthings? And still walking around like that, her expectation was, I'm here in this part of St. Louis County. I'm going to walk into this Whole Foods. I'm going to shop and no one's going to touch me. I'm dressed inappropriately, but I want to and I will, and no one's going to touch me. We just have these expectations here. All of these things change when we import third worlders. Yeah, I said it. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with that truth? Don't get mad at me for saying it. There's a cardinal. He's black. He's from Ghana, I think. And he's huge in the Catholic Church. And he just said, now, I don't have the audio for you because he's speaking in French, I believe. So that wouldn't work for us here on this show because we speak English. But he said, in essence, that he disagrees with Pope Francis about his stance on we have to help migrants get into these Western countries because he said this isn't an issue about migrant or not migrant or legal or illegal, although those are important distinctions. He said we can't allow people who aren't Christians to migrate en masse into Christian countries because they are the reason that Christian countries will no longer be Christian. Now, do you see what's going on? While we're focusing on the legal, illegal issue, which I certainly have focused on that, haven't I? The issue is a Christian nation cannot remain Christian if you repopulate it with people who aren't Christians. Now, some of the people coming from the southern border are Christians. A good number of them are actually Catholic, really. But, oh no, I think we've had callers and, oh no, I can't see any callers. So we have, I'm just checking in with my producer. He just texted me and I can't see callers. That call screening thing is not hooked up. So what we're doing is we are allowing, we are permitting our Christian heritage to be obliterated. And it's no wonder that the Democrats are doing it. Sorry, Democrats who listen to the show. Y'all know better. Your convention was booing God. You guys are the ones who want to take God out of your platform. You guys are the one who have weakened the language on the protection of Israel and as our closest ally. Y'all have the problem on that front. And so, you can say, well, I'm a moderate or I'm an independent, but I just vote with the Democrats. You just voting with those godless folks who want to take away our Christian heritage. And that's what this immigration thing is about. It's about power seeking, obviously, changing the ability for Republicans to just have Americans vote for, conservative ideas in the Constitution, and the obliteration of Christianity our heritage, eliminating it. So we can't allow that to happen. It's just garbage. It's total garbage. So if we have callers, and I can't see them, but if we have some, you're welcome to. Let me take a look and see. Yeah, I can't. Oh, John. Okay, let's go to John in Kansas. Thank you so much for calling the show today.
Hi, I just want to tell you I love your show, and it's so encouraging to hear you preaching the gospel the way you do and connect it to what's going on. And I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, very violent, dangerous environment in the 60s. People put bars on their houses not to keep police out, not to keep police from helping them, but to prevent criminals from coming into their houses. And in this country, we have the inner cities barred because of that. People are trying to protect themselves, not from the police, but from people who want to break in, steal, and kill them. The past couple decades, the Democrats have really pushed government-subsidized housing into so many different parts of the country where non-Democrats don't have a stronghold. And what's going to result is these illegal immigrants are going to move into, and we're seeing it, subsidized housing. The government's promoting it. They're going to create the same kind of environments I tried to get out of as a kid, to get out of Detroit because of how dangerous and hostile it was. And we're seeing that in neighborhoods around the country. I live in Kansas now, and there are communities that used to be great places to raise your family, and now it's become very similar to what I grew up in Highland Park, in the inner city of Detroit. And, it's very, to your point, it's very discouraging to listen to the news. But God has an answer. And what's amazed me, and you've talked about it, Trump got elected, which is, just blew my mind.
Me too.
And not just that he got elected, but he's done more pro-life work as a president than I imagined he would, or anybody running for president in the last 40 years.
I didn't think he could pull all that off, to be honest. No, I'm with you. I couldn't have.
And then the other thing is I'm thinking, well, they're so after this guy, and, there's got to be something there, and like you said. And then, but God made a way for him to get cleared of all this collusion. And, we have to also look at what God's doing in our country, using somebody we didn't expect as a vessel to bring about change. And so we have to pray, we have to fast, and believe that God is going to turn this culture back. And we need to be evangelists with our neighbors, like you're saying, and one by one win this country back.
It's true. I want to say thanks, John. Thank you for the comments and for the compliments. Now, I would just piggyback on what he's saying. He couldn't hit it on the head more perfectly. And he said fasting, which I didn't say earlier, and I didn't leave that out intentionally. We do have to fast, because that's when we really, we move the hand of God when we are weak, and we come to him in that condition, when we discipline ourselves in that way. And so I encourage you. I hear it in John's voice. I know I felt it this week so many times, the burden of this kind of, it's just bad, horrible news. But only the grown-ups feel that way, right? I mean, people who have no wisdom don't see the calamity until it is already overtaken them. The Bible says that. So we've got to pray and fast and speak to our neighbors about the seriousness of this issue and write these legislators. I mean, that's a plateful, but we can handle it. God is able to work through us. Let's get it done. When we get back, we'll have Paula Bolyard with us. So you guys stay right there.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, A lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your health care. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Lots of controversial ideas get promoted during election season. We are getting our share of them this time. Eliminate the Electoral College, regulate campaign speech, and end the filibuster are just a few. It occurred to me that the best way to respond to many of these proposals is to remind Americans that our country is a republic, not a democracy. The framers recognized that this country would be quite diverse. They wanted to create a government that would allow different viewpoints to get a hearing. They didn't want the president merely to be elected by the larger populations in the cities like Boston and New York. That is why we have an electoral college. States with small populations feared that states with large populations would always select their candidate. The electoral college forces candidates to campaign in the entire country, not just in population areas. That also explains why we have a House of Representatives elected by voters every 2 years, but regardless of its size, each state gets 2 U.S. senators who were selected by the state legislatures every 6 years and are now elected by the popular vote. We have a Bill of Rights in the Constitution to protect Americans, especially minorities, from a democracy where the majority could take away fundamental rights from a minority. We enjoy freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to bear arms, and freedom from unlawful search and seizure. Even the idea of a filibuster in the U.S. Senate was implemented so that the majority would be forced to hear the arguments from the minority before passing important legislation. The filibuster may have been abused, but the concept once again illustrates our constitutional order. Unfortunately, many of these controversial ideas are being proposed today by political candidates who went to law school and should know better. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Before we get to our guests, let's go ahead and take a quick phone call. We were having some difficulty with our producer software that tells me that we have callers. So we'll really quickly go to Mason in Mississippi. Hey, Mason, thank you so much for calling the show today.
Hello, Stacy.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, Stacy, I'm good. Hey, long time listener, first time caller. I just want to say thank you, first of all, for doing what you're doing. You're doing God's work.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm calling today to talk to you about how President Trump has been saving our country, especially from Barack Hussein Obama, and how he used the UNESCO World Heritage System to take over at least a dozen, some people say up to 15 naturally occurring aquifers around our country. Now, Obama declaring these sites UNESCO World Heritage Sites allows these European, these foreign, these socialist organizations and powerful, wealthy liberals to come in and take up all our water. And Stacey, you know where they send that water?
No.
They send to Europe.
Oh.
And the third world countries. So President Trump is putting a stop to that. Because UNESCO is taking up all our water, and then overseas where... You ever heard of Ferrero Rocher, Stacy?
Yeah, my daughter loves those.
Your daughter loves those? Well, you better be careful, okay? Because Ferrero Rocher is pulling stuff in our water, they're sending it back, and you know what happens from there. And it's mind control.
Well, so thank you so much for calling and for listening to the show. I appreciate your call. But we do have to get to our guests right now. And I just wanted to make sure that you got a chance to call in and make your comment on air because we were having that little snafu with our producer software. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Paula Bolyard. She's a managing editor of PJ Media and one of my favorite sites, pjmedia.com. Paula, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Stacy. Great to be with you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so let's talk about this audit of Twitter. It's my junior senator from the great state of Missouri, where I live, who's actually putting out this clarion call that, Twitter cannot continue to suppress conservative speech.
Right. And who doesn't love Senator Hawley? I mean, he is really killing it, especially on this issue of tech companies censoring conservatives. So I think we're lucky to have him in the Senate. But, he put out a call last week for Twitter to have a third-party audit because he doesn't think they can correct the problem of censoring and deplatforming conservatives. And he called on them to do that as a result of the movie Unplanned, their Twitter account, first being suspended as the movie was hitting the box office and then losing 100,000 followers in a couple hours, which is very troubling.
It is. And I was kind of watching all of that. I tried to follow the account and I kept clicking the follow button. It wouldn't let me. And then the account was taken down. And then when it was put back up, I tried to follow again. And after 6 attempts, I was finally able to click the button and it worked. But I tried, went away from Twitter, came back, tried, went away from Twitter. And it was a few hours later that I was able to follow. So if I'd given up, then I just wouldn't be able to get their content because at the time I wasn't allowed to follow them. And they've lost their blue check mark, which apparently losing the blue check mark also knocks some of your followers off as well.
Yeah, it was a very bad situation. And, Facebook, as always, they blame the algorithm and say they didn't do anything intentionally, but it keeps happening. Conservatives keep getting deplatformed, suspended. We've had several of our authors and editors at PJ Media suspended with no explanation for months at a time. And in particular, it happened to Bridget Johnson, who really never posts anything even slightly controversial on her Twitter feed, and she was deplatformed for several months and still has they restored her account eventually, but never gave her an explanation for it. But, they can blame the algorithm and say the computer did it, but it is very suspect because it happens to conservatives so often.
Well, and I need to make the point that the thing that's most disturbing to me about it is we don't have anyone who's a representative there that we can reach out to directly. So for Facebook, they have a number of people that you can reach out to and say, do you see what's going on with my account? And you can send them screen grabs and they'll help you. But with Twitter, they don't have anyone. And that's because their company is 100% homogenous. They don't have anyone working there, even though they've had Glenn Beck and, a number of people, Ali Alexander, people that we know or that we've met before, that we've seen their work, went to that big conservative meeting. It was like a roundtable thing. Facebook had one and Twitter had one. And nothing came out of the Twitter one because they didn't hire anybody who could interface with us. So we still don't have, you have no recourse. If something happens, you just have to tweet at Twitter or at support and hope that someone makes your tweet go viral. Like you have to have a congressman care about you. Like Jesse Kelly had congressmen retweeting the fact that he'd been suspended for no reason. And, obviously I'm glad to see Jesse back. He didn't deserve to be thrown off, but not all of us have congressmen who will retweet us if we get the boot.
Right, you're exactly right. And, even if they were to add someone conservative to their staff, look what happened at Google this week. They tried to put Kay Cole James from Heritage on their board, and employees en masse rose up and railroaded her out, and they just canceled the committee altogether.
I talked about that
they
today.
Couldn't dare to associate with her.
Right, a woman who is on a board for NASA. So I don't think they chose her because she was a conservative. They chose her because she was the only one available who also had the connection they needed to NASA, because they want their board to have access to agencies that can help them with this AI project. It's a no-brainer for them to have her on the committee. In fact, what else could they do if they can't have her on the committee and they can't have the drone guy? They might as well disband. They had no other choice.
Right. It's not about her qualifications or her background. It's that she thinks wrong, and she doesn't say the right things, and she doesn't parrot the left-wing talking points. So she's not acceptable. It's unbelievable the bubble they live in. I'm out here in rural Wayne County, Ohio, out in farm country, and I just went to a Republican dinner this week, and the prayers and the references to God and to Jesus. If someone from Silicon Valley were to come and show up at that dinner, they'd have probably committed suicide there on the spot because they couldn't handle it. They would have had to take them out in straitjackets. It's a different world out there in California.
It is, because I can tell you that is my life here in Missouri. And I know it's not the same for everyone who lives in the St. Louis metro area. There are plenty of godless people here who don't have any interaction with people of faith, but they're the minority by a long shot. I regularly hear people talking about, faith. I see people praying in public, lots of the fish kind of decals on cars. But more than anything, it's this kind of acceptance, even if it's begrudging by some people. Like the educational sphere here in Missouri is very anti-God, very, very much against Christians being represented. But that's in public school. Every other place, private schools, you see people acknowledging that they have to, because they're donors, and a lot of the people who send their kids to school there are Christians, and they're not willing to alienate those people. I don't know what a Californian would do if they just had to, kind of experience what I experience on the regular basis, which I find wonderful. Almost all the hospitals here in St. Louis are either Jewish in origin or they're Catholic in origin, meaning I was at the doctor yesterday in the morning. I saw scripture on the wall. It's just like,
Yeah.
I didn't even bat an eye. I was just like, oh, that's comforting,
Right. It's the same way here. And, I think if they were magically transported here one day, we'd have to provide Play-Doh and service animals and whatnot to get, help them to cope with all those references to God all over the place in Ohio and Missouri and Mississippi.
Wait, did you say Play-Doh? Is that a thing? Giving Play-Doh to adults to help them cope?
Isn't that what they did after Trump was elected? They had safe spaces at colleges where they provided Play-Doh for them to help them work out their stress.
I heard about the dogs and the therapy dogs. I didn't hear about the Play-Doh. That is pretty amazing.
No, there was. I would be so ashamed if one of my sons had gone to a college and needed a safe space. I would feel like I had totally failed as a parent. So would I.
I mean, sometimes when, and obviously as moms, we know our kids, but sometimes we'll laugh, because we have so much stuff going on here, and sometimes the best way to deal with stuff is to laugh at it. And so we've been making jokes out of some, they're serious issues, but we've been making jokes out of them. And I actually enjoy that so much, because it means that even in the midst of something it's clearly not an optimal situation, if we can laugh about it, it to me demonstrates, it's kind of like we're trusting God to take care of this. And so we just can laugh about it and not worry. And that is something that is really, it takes mental toughness to do that. And we should appreciate it, because as you pointed out, Paula, it's in short supply.
Right. And, eventually maybe it'll be illegal to laugh at things like that. But for now we can do, which is why I am such a huge fan of the Babylon Bee. They take these issues that everybody's so intense and so serious about and make light of, on both sides. It's not just, going after Democrats or liberals. It goes after our own people and our own churches too, which in some, cases is very well deserved.
I love it when they go after the right, because then I can laugh at that, and then I don't have to feel like I'm only laughing at the left when they go after them. I think if you're going to do stuff that's, play stupid games or do stupid tricks, win stupid prizes, whatever the slogan is, it's appropriate. Let's make light of some of this stuff, because we deserve an opportunity to laugh in the face of all this bad news. I'm wondering if over at PJ Media, have you guys been covering at all the 650,000 illegal aliens that are set to be released into the country if immigration keeps up at the same outrageous pace, the illegal immigration at the southern border? Have you guys been covering that?
Yeah, well, we have a daily live blog, so we update it constantly on what's going on in the news. So we've talked about it a lot over there in particular. But, yeah, it's a huge issue and very scary to think about that. And it seems like, obviously, systems are not in place to handle that appropriately.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really disturbing about this is that we have Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats who are literally saying there's no emergency, when Jay Johnson, who is nowhere near a moderate, he's a hardcore leftist. He's even said 1,000 a day was a crisis during the Obama administration, and we're at 4,000 a day. And he's saying he doesn't even understand how we're still functioning. How can we not have the Democrats at least say, okay, all right, we'll give you that, it's a crisis.
Right. Well, because they want to import more Democrat voters. That's what it's all about. We all know what the game is here.
But isn't it true, Paula, that once the people who are for, like, the so-called proletariat, which is the fancy upscale multimillionaires who run the Democrats, once they get all of their third worlders in here, the first people the third worlders will want to kill, stone to death, run over with their cars, toss off of skyscrapers will be Nancy Pelosi and her ilk, because they won't be liberal and socialist enough.
Right, you're absolutely right. But no one ever accused Democrats and Nancy Pelosi of long-term thinking here. They are about how do we win the next election and maybe the one after that, but they're not thinking 20, 30 years down the road. And that's how they managed to pass Obamacare. They knew there would be fallout, but it was more expedient to pass it immediately before anybody had a chance to see what was in it.
Well, I got to say, and I get that. You're totally right, Paula, but there's a thing. You can see destruction coming upon you. Like, you can actually see it. We tend to ignore it, but you can see it. And I think the warning for Nancy Pelosi is AOC. It's those three, actually. Tlaib, Omar, and AOC. Those are the warnings. They're the canaries in the coal mine. They're the blinking red light and the bell sounding. The train is upon you. Get off the track. Nancy Pelosi should be, because she's losing control of the Democrats, which I think she thought she'd have a really easy time this go around, second time as speaker. That should be her clarion call that maybe on immigration they've gone too far to the left, because the people who come in will be more radical than those three.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, she can't shut them up. The train has left the station and it ain't coming back. She has tried to temper their crazy, but she can't do it. They can go right around her. And the same thing Trump did. He was able to go around the establishment by using Twitter, and they're doing the same thing. And another issue I think that's happening on is abortion, the infanticide in New York and Virginia. When I go to church and I go to prayer meetings, that's what people are talking about. And I haven't heard anything like this in a long time. People are asking for prayer for it, asking what they can do. And I think they really, really overshot on that. And I think that's going to be an issue in 2020.
Well, so yes, I believe you're right about that. I think a lot of people who are good, I'm trying to avoid using my quote fingers, because I know there are people who are truly, they're like God-fearing Christians, and they're just misled, and they're really sticking with the Democrats for whatever reason, that it's almost like they woke up one day and they're like, wait, these are Democrats saying this? Infanticide? Wait, what? And then they had to a lot of them were just so repulsed, their automatic reaction was, like you said, praying. They're not going to vote for them anymore. And they might not be at a place where they're willing to embrace President Trump, but they've certainly had an awakening that we just couldn't seem to get it done. This issue has awakened a ton of Americans to the truth about who the Democrats have become. Paula, managing editor at PJ Media, you guys do great work over there. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Stacy. I enjoyed it, and thanks for your kind words.
All right, well, we'll talk to you again soon. Paula Bolyard, fantastic. She's an excellent writer. I actually posted one of their pieces over at the Facebook page. If you'd like to read, click through, check them out. All right, we will be back with more. Last segment of the show, Friday, guys. You can call in 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. More Stacy on the right after this.
Equipped with Chris Brooks.
This program is an apologetic endeavor. What I want to do is really train you in the art and science of defending and commending your Christian faith to people who maybe they've been hurt by the church, maybe they don't believe like you believe, and you're saying to yourself, how do I have an effective conversation with them? Well, we're looking for an evangelistic edge, if you will, that will allow us to more effectively, more contextualize the gospel so that we can reach men and women for Christ. Quite often, the on-ramp, if you will, is looking at culture and taking advantage of the conversations that folks are already having and saying, how can I leverage this to get people to talk about Jesus? This show becomes kind of massively significant to you if your desire is to reach people for Christ.
Get equipped with Chris Brooks.
Join me Monday through Friday at noon Central Time on Urban Family Talk.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Securing America.
Transgender troops remain in limbo as the Trump administration's new ban makes its way through the courts. The Democratic-controlled House passed a non-binding resolution opposing the policy. Congressman Joe Kennedy led the effort.
Here in our country, if you can wear the uniform, if you can meet those standards, then your contribution counts. Your government's got your back.
The White House has argued the Defense Department should not be paying for sex reassignment surgeries. Republican Representative Vicky Hartzler agrees.
The Department of Defense announced already that they have spent $8 million on those individuals who have identified as transgender last year, and that money has been spent on psychotherapy, on sex change operations, and that's money that could have been spent on bullets, body armor for our troops.
In January, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed the policy to go into effect while the issue plays out in lower courts. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Russia seeks to return to great power status and will continue to challenge the United States, not only in Europe, but also in the Middle East, Asia, the Arctic, Africa, the Western Hemisphere. They continue to undermine NATO as an alliance and sow dissent throughout the European continent, as we know, even in our own homeland, through a variety of means. Russia remains the only current existential threat to the United States and will become, in my opinion, increasingly opportunistic and willing to take greater risk in the near term.
So too bad the Democrats don't care about that reality. They only care about Russia as it pertains to, hey, they're the puppet masters of Donald Trump. Notice how none of them have apologized for saying that he was a Russian agent, that he committed treason. The very ones who are saying that are the ones who committed treason. Welcome back to the show. I'm Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. I keep saying register for the conference, which is in the last weekend in June, but it's not the last weekend. It's the 21st and 22nd, which is the second to the last weekend. Make a note of it. You can go to urbanfamilytalk.com and get actual real up-to-date data on it instead of relying just on me and my weird, calendar memory. Just admitting the truth, guys. It's Friday. You cannot get me down today. I'm so ready. Tomorrow it's supposed to be 71 degrees. And so there's a possibility that we could still have some winter weather show up. And I'm so miffed about it. I don't even want to, can we just talk about how miffed it makes me that we could have 70 degrees for 3 or 4 days and everybody start acting like it's spring and putting plants in pots and stuff, and then all of a sudden we could have a cold snap. I'm annoyed, but I'm glad that the person who pointed that out to me did mention it so that I can not be one of those people whose stuff freezes overnight and then have to start over again, which I will not be doing. I'm not doing it 2 times. Sorry. So welcome back to the show. Now I want to pivot over to, you heard this Army Chief of Staff saying Russia remains the only current existential threat to the U.S. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration because China is also a threat, but they maintain a better status with us as allies, I think, than Russia does. But they're still out. Like, look, they let that fentanyl thing go on for how many years? How many Americans died? They didn't do anything to stop it. That's hardly the action of an ally. But anyway, so now I want to pivot over to Ken Starr. Full disclosure. I may or may not have, when I was on regular commercial radio, said unkind things about Ken Starr. Nothing that would make the news, but I definitely wasn't a fan. I was tired of him and his whiteboard. I was tired of people acting like he was such a huge expert. Yet here I am about to play some audio from him. He says that House Dems, actually, I'm mistaking him for Karl Rove. Karl Rove is the one I made the untoward comments about with the whiteboard. Ken Starr only pops up occasionally. I don't really have anything against him. I mean, you know, whatever. But he has this audio bit that I want to play here on the show. I want you to listen to, of him declaring an all-out war on President Trump. Now, it's interesting because as often as we see kind of the people who they say they're nonpartisan come out and kind of make a statement one way or the other, this statement is so true. And I think it kind of accounts for what we keep marveling at, which is we don't see Democrats apologizing. We don't see them backtracking. We don't see them acknowledging that the president's been exonerated. Well, you can't do that if you've declared war. If you've declared war on someone, it doesn't matter what you learn about them. You still have to take them down, right? So here he is. It's number 1.
We have to protect grand jury information, full stop. Now, there can be a court order under certain circumstances to reveal this, but you know, there are policy reasons for grand jury secrecy. It's not just a rule. It's a rule that says, witness, when you go before the grand jury, you can rest assured, you got to be truthful, don't lie, but you can rest assured that that will remain confidential except the most extraordinary circumstances. Just wide and full disclosure is just not anticipated by witnesses. So I think it really tugs at the very purpose and function of a grand jury. Leaving aside national security information, as we know, Bob Mueller reached out to a number of foreign countries. There's some 13 requests of foreign countries. So there's a lot of sensitive stuff, and we haven't even gotten to privacy interests that Chairman Nadler used to care a lot about.
Yeah, Chairman Nadler used to care a lot about privacy when it was President Clinton who was having all of his business shared. But now that it's Donald Trump, he doesn't care. So Ken Starr actually discussed the process of releasing the report. And, you know, I've done a whole lot of speculating here on air, but let's listen to an expert here. He's been through this before. He was the author of the Ken Starr report on President Clinton's malfeasances. So, number 2.
Yeah, they will literally be in a room going line by line. Obviously, we live in the electronic age, but I'll bet you a nickel that they are sitting around going line by line through the report, so that's going to take a while. But Bill Barr has promised transparency, so he's going to try to do his job to protect the sanctity and the confidentiality of the grand jury process. Again, we've talked about national security information, but they're going in with highlighters and saying, hey, this is grand jury information, so we've got to be careful about that. So, by the way, just as a quick editorial note, we now see the problems of what we used to do during the statute under which I operate, which is full disclosure, give it to Congress, and then Congress will do whatever it wants. So guess what Congress did with the so-called Starr report? It revealed it all, shockingly, right? And then people recoiled and said, well, we don't want that anymore. That's what these regulations are designed to do, to stop that kind of complete, full Monty disclosure.
So does that make sense? I really feel like it does. It makes it much more civilized. And of course, the public has a need to know. We're the taxpayers. We paid for everything that they did. But we have a responsibility to protect people and to operate in a civilized manner. And if he were guilty, it'd be a totally different story, because you would think to yourself, okay, well, we need to see what's in there. And we still can see what's in there. We just don't need to see every little jot and tittle because it's not necessary. And that's what those regulations were meant to protect. So now I want to pivot over to old Jussie Smollett. You know, I've just been holding back. I mean, obviously we've discussed it a little on the show, but I've been holding back a little bit because I thought to myself, if it's anybody who knows how to play machine politics, it's the police up in Chicago. And they are not playing around with Jussie Smollett. They have just sued him. So remember, I catch you up on the updates if you haven't been paying attention, because this story, I mean, I know it enrages some people, but I'm not enraged. I'm amused because I just don't think they're done with him yet. He was given a deadline with which to repay them $130,000 for the cost of the investigation into the attack against him because it was fake. Well, the deadline has come and gone, and he's refused to reimburse the city of Chicago for the cost of police overtime spent investigating his false report. So, and this is from a spokesperson of the Midwestern metropolis of Chicago. So they're saying that the law department is now drafting a civil complaint that will be filed in the Circuit Court of Cook County. Once it's filed, the law department will send a courtesy copy of the complaint to Mr. Smollett's LA-based legal team. Under Chicago bylaws, and made clear in the letter Smollett was sent on March 28th, the city can seek more than $390,000 from the actor, which is 3 times the original amount, plus court costs and attorney's fees. Representatives for Smollett had no comment when they were contacted by Deadline, who's reporting this story. Now, he was written out of the last 2 episodes of Empire. But Empire has currently, it's got like a renewal thing that it's under right now. They have to decide if they're going to renew the show. And in that same time frame, you know, his contract is up, so they have a couple of months to decide whether or not they're going to bring him back as well. This is horrible for him because what he was hoping for when his friend, no, it was his mother, I think. His mom contacted her friend who is deeply connected to the Obamas, and Michelle Obama made some calls to her friend who's the prosecutor and got the charges against him dismissed because he was trying to calm everything down and let the story die out so that he could get his contract renewed. So instead of negotiating for more money, he's just basically trying to keep his job now. Well, with this lawsuit by the Chicago police, it's just not going to happen. This story's not going to go away because now we got to wait and see what the judge says. Will the judge rule against him? What amount will the judge assign in damages? If the judge rules against him, what will happen? Yeah, it's its own show. Only the thing about this show is there's no money associated with it. So also, Rahm Emanuel has just been out of control. He said that he's angry. He called it a whitewash of justice. And Chicago, the police there have also done a vote of no confidence against the prosecutor. Apparently, this woman actually, a unanimous vote. Let me get that out. The union representing the Chicago Police Department and the chiefs of 30 surrounding police departments revealed that they conducted a no confidence vote into Fox's office. The result was a unanimous, because that's Chicago style, right? But they've also got Mayor-elect and ex-prosecutor Lightfoot saying she's going to look into what went on in the Smollett case. So that's another horrible wrinkle, not in his favor. But the most important part of all of it, the part that just, this guy is still holding on to the fact, Jussie Smollett, he's still holding on to the lie that he was attacked. Instead of just admitting, because he wrote the checks. The 2 Nigerian guys have already saved their skins by telling the truth about what happened. And then you've got Taraji P. Henson, who's saying that he is coming back, which I'm sure she probably wants him to because she doesn't care about what he does or money that, you know, she's rich. She doesn't have to be, she doesn't have to care about what police departments have to pay. Personally, if you want to know what I want, I would love for them to cancel the series. Just cancel it. But I don't watch it. I don't know what its ratings are. I just know it's garbage. And we probably won't see that. But who knows what can happen. We can always hope. We can keep hope alive. So I wanted to kind of run down these last stories. I had a whole bunch of stuff for you today, and we had great callers, great guests, and so we didn't get to everything. But quickly, remember I talked about, we did mention it when I was on with Paula. Google has disbanded the Artificial Intelligence Ethics Board because they had a drone company representative who was on the board, and they had Kay Coles James. And because of the backlash, 2,300 comments on the Google messaging sites, and, scientists and Googlers, as they call themselves, a whole lot of people really upset about the board having anybody on it that they didn't like. So now they've disbanded it, and they're going to have to regroup and come back later with, basically they won't be allowed to have anybody on there who's connected to NASA because they don't have anybody else they can get. Maybe they'll come up with someone. Pivoting over to jobs, we talked about the 196,000 jobs created last month. And I just want to kind of caution people, when you hear the naysayers talking about how the economy is going to slow down, there's going to be a recession, there's going to be a, this kind of bubble, that kind of pop, whatever. Just remember that the economy is based largely upon the sentiment of the people participating in it. So pessimists want to talk the economy down because they would love to see an economic crash or at least a recession going into the next election, because that is the only way that they can ensure that President Trump wouldn't be reelected. Because Americans don't like reelecting someone who's presiding over a garbage economy unless they're voting for that person because they don't want to be thought of as racist, as they did for Barack Obama. Slowest recovery ever in the history of this country. Still got reelected. Black privilege. Oh, I know people don't want to hear that. Miss me with it. It's the weekend. So then you've also got the blue collar workers enjoying wage hikes, thanks due in no small part to a shortage in foreign workers. This is according to the New York Times. They hate anything having to do with the truth or conservatism. They have this piece out entitled, The Long and the Short. Hold on. They have a piece out titled, Short of Workers, U.S. Builders and Farmers Crave More Immigrants. The Times admits that President Trump's tightened higher American labor market through increased immigration enforcement has delivered historic low unemployment rates. And I have to say, give it up. Give a little bit of credit where credit is due. So it's good news when Americans can make more money because employers don't have the option of undercutting our American labor force by hiring illegals and foreigners. It's always good news. That's good news on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all week long, 24 hours a day. That's good news. Now, I just want to remind you, going into the weekend, you may encounter someone who will say that the real issue now is not Russian collusion or obstruction because the president, paid off Barr to fix things up for him, and Mueller really wasn't as honorable as we thought. But it turns out a lot of people in the White House don't have security clearances, and that's the real rub. It's those Trump kids. They don't have security clearances. Don't buy it. Do you remember the story we covered here on the show extensively? Daily Caller News Foundation reporting on point. Muslim IT spies given jobs with access to highly sensitive information in the House of Representatives. 44 House Democrats exempted them from background checks, and they were able to come in and bilk all that money out of the American taxpayers. Yeah, don't let them get away with it, people. They never care about background checks unless the last name on the background check request is Trump. Okay? All right, that's the weekend. Y'all get out there and enjoy yourselves. God bless from the Heartland citizens. Until next week.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family.
Issue facing our country. AFA action alerts have been very successful in influencing legislation as